Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a very special Foodie and the Beast with David and Nycci Nellis, and it's really more than Foodie and the Beast. Nycci will explain in a minute, but I just want to thank our sponsors. They make the show possible: the Fish and Fire Group, Profish, Tony and Joe's, Nick's Riverside, The Point, The Strand, Greg Caston.
Thank you.
Thanks for sponsoring the show. Nick, why don't you get into it?
Yeah, so this is very exciting. This is our first ever Foodie and the Beast Industry Night collab. I'm very excited. So today we actually have cameras here in studio. So not only does this show drop on all the Foodie and the Beast channels, it will also be dropping in a couple weeks on the Industry Night channel. So I'm very excited about this opportunity. And the reason this opportunity is in existence is really thanks to Brent Kroll. A couple weeks ago, he's pouring the wine back in the bottle. I don't know what's happening over there. I was at his property, Maxwell, a couple weeks ago for a panel discussion on tariffs. And it was a lot of industry insiders there. It was a really interesting conversation about what tariffs are, how they affect the wine industry, and what restaurants and the layperson can expect if these tariffs actually go into effect. And as I was listening to all these amazing speakers, I was like, I got to get this on one of my shows. Like, I need a panel for this. And I was like, oh, I'll do it on Foodie and the Beast. And then I was like, no, there should be cameras. I'm going to do it on Industry Night. And then I was like, wait, I can do it on both. So ta-da, that's what we're doing today. And I'm very excited because we have an amazing group of people in here who are really informed and have the stats and the data and also the understanding of how not only this affects the wine business and the restaurants, but at the end of the day, how it's going to affect your wallet. So, David, why don't you introduce everybody we have in studio?
Well, I just want to mention that my pay was doubled for this collaboration show. All right, so we've got some great guests today. An old friend of ours, Eric Segelbaum, is vice president of United Sommeliers Foundation and the owner of Swig Partners. Vanessa Cominsky is a somm and beverage specialist at Prestige LeDroit Distributing. Mike Scaffidi is an advanced somm whose resume includes lots of places you know: French Laundry, Union Square Cafe in New York, Jean-Georges, who has the best skin in America.
He does have
and
really
a buddy of ours who's we've probably known him almost as long as he's been alive, Brent Kroll from Maxwell, Pop Fizz and more. We'll get Brent's background in a minute, but he was named the 2018 Food and Wine Somm of the Year, and he's in not only to join in the conversation, but to keep our spirits up with lots of spirits,
so
wine.
Brent, let's start with you. What are you going to pour for us today? Because I think we all need some really delicious wine to get this talk going.
I need to grab a backup bottle. My bottle was corked.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
The odds are low.
Yeah, but you know what? Honesty is the best
But
policy.
not only that, of all the shows for a bottle to be corked with a room full of stuff.
You need the Price is Right sting.
Okay,
So I have another bottle.
All right,
Go
well,
get your other wine and let's go into.
Here's the thing. First of all, tariffs sounds like this omnibus thing, but there are lots of different kinds of tariffs. They have lots of different kinds of impacts. Some think they're good, some think they're bad. We're not here to judge. We're here to get into it.
It's true, but before we get into it, can we let everybody introduce themselves?
Yeah, I'm just saying. I want to
Okay.
make that clear because it's not just this blanket thing anymore, and people are hearing a lot about it. So why don't we start? Eric, give us your background and a little bit about you.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm a little over 3 decades in this industry. I was a fine dining chef for 10 years, sommelier for now 23, an advanced somm. I was able to get into Brent's class as the 2019 Food and Wine Somm of the Year, which was really cool. But I'm no longer in restaurants. When I was the corporate beverage director for Steven Starr's multi-million-dollar empire. Now I'm the co-owner of Swig Partners. We are an import and distribution Yenta. Basically, we are a matchmaking service for alcoholic beverage brands looking for importers and distributors in all 50 states. I'm the vice president of the United Sommeliers Foundation, helped found that organization. We provide emergency financial resources to wine industry professionals who are in critical financial need through no fault of their own. I have a luxury wine club. I'm Smithsonian's national wine educator and a whole bunch of other stuff that we're not going to talk about.
Okay, great. Expert number one. Expert number two, Vanessa Cominsky. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. So I'm Vanessa Cominsky. I am a sommelier, but I work in distribution. I work for Prestige LeDroit. We sell wine, beer, spirits, non-alcoholic things of all sorts and sizes. I've been doing that since 2021. And I'm also from the dining side, so I worked at St. Anselm as the beverage director with Eric. I came down in D.C. to work at DBGB but Daniel Boulud, and then finished out my tenure in restaurants at Albee with Michael Raffiti. So some pretty good places to eat. I do still try to go back to all except DBGB, which is closed.
I know, R.I.P.
I know.
Okay,
All right, Michael
Mr.
Scaffidi.
Well, I've been a sommelier for a long time. So, yeah, I used to work at French Laundry as sommelier and John George, and I was director of beverage at the Greenbrier, which is not a great place for a city boy. And then I came to Washington, D.C., and I opened up the Jefferson Hotel, moved to New York City. That's where I worked at John George. I came back here because D.C. is my favorite place. And honestly, I came back here, and now I'm working in sales, just like Vanessa. And I also curate as many wine lists as people will let me help curate.
Excellent.
But where I'm at, which I really love, is meeting people, and I have connections because now meeting Vanessa through wine. Brent and I actually have become closer, not just through wine, but we play pickleball on a weekly basis together.
Okay. Expert number 3, expert number 4, who now has a bottle that is not corked, we hope.
Yay.
Brent,
Hopefully
just
not.
tell people a little bit about you quickly, and then,
Too loud.
okay, not too loud.
I ran with that.
Okay, tell us a little bit about you.
Let's see. I started off in wine in Detroit. I was mentored by Madeline Trefano, I still keep in touch with, who's a really famous female master sommelier.
So cool.
The best. And then I got certified at 22 and became a really young sommelier at Casa Tua in Miami. I've been in D.C. since 2008 with about 3 years apiece for Ashok Bajaj Neighborhood Restaurant Group, and then Alain Ducasse in the St. Regis before starting Maxwell in 2017. And now I'm a partner and owner of 3 bars, Maxwell Park, named after my childhood park in Detroit, Pop, and Troublebird by LB.
Excellent.
Well
Thank you so
done.
much. All right, tell us quickly what you're pouring, and let's get into our conversation.
It's Pierre Payard. This is a guy named Quentin Payard who took over the property with his brother within the last 10 years, and they're in Boozy, the warmest Grand Cru in Champagne. Quentin's like a really nice, kind of gentle guy, about 6'6", but he used to be a D.C. resident. He went from Champagne to D.C., back to Champagne, and this is his Le Parcelle Boozy Grand Cru.
Excellent. All right, let's get
All right.
busy.
So again, the whole point of this conversation is to discuss how wine tariffs could harm our favorite restaurants and bars or not, and focus on the business of wine and what impacts they'll have there. Eric, why don't you give us a little background on the whole?
Right, on tariffs, so people have an understanding what we're talking about, because it's so blanketed and people don't really understand how it affects individual industries.
Of course. Well, I'm glad you used that word blanket because there are in fact 2 basic types of tariffs, blanket and retaliatory. Blanket tariffs are, recently there was talk about tariffs on Canada and Mexico. And blanket tariffs are on all products, all imports, regardless of reason. And really the law that the president used to enact those is called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And it's a law that allows the president to regulate international commerce when a national emergency is declared. So the reason you hear these tariffs coming in when we're talking about like fentanyl or border security is because that qualifies as an economic emergency and allows the president to invoke that. Those are blanket tariffs. What we're really here to talk about, though, are retaliatory tariffs. What's threatening the wine industry are retaliatory tariffs. And those are in response to discriminatory and unfair international trade practices. And I want to be really clear. The U.S. has every right to put retaliatory tariffs on the EU because left of the aisle, right of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats all agree that the EU is a problematic trading bloc. And there are 2 major issues. One is the digital services tax, which specifically targets American companies. In fact, the French government was stupid enough to call it the GAFA tax, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon. And the reason that's a predatory tax is the floor is so low that it only targets these American companies. And the other one, which is tabled for now, but potentially back in the conversation, is the unfair Airbus subsidy disputes. So the idea that the EU is not being a good trade partner is absolutely correct. The idea that America should respond is absolutely correct. However, the wine industry, as we'll discuss, is not the right industry to target. And it was tried once and it failed, and it did about $250 million of damage to American small businesses. There's no reason to think that it would succeed again, and there are a lot of reasons that it won't. So ultimately, retaliatory tariffs are the right move, but not on wine.
Well, so Brent, I want to throw to you for a second because tariffs were enacted 5 years ago against wine, right?
Yeah, they like temporarily. And when this happened, like before it happened in 2020,
right.
We did not get support together, which I realized we should have. But we posted a menu pre and post tariff pricing right before it happened so people could see and put it on our social media.
Well, can we talk a little bit about how this tariffs affect the restaurant? Because I think if we start there, then we can work backwards to how the wine industry works, right?
Yeah, it's great. So how they basically affect a restaurant is restaurants rely on profitability from their wine program, and a lot of European wines, obviously, especially in restaurants. So if you can't have profit off that because you have to charge so much, it causes people to drink less, to go out less. Bars and restaurants potentially close because they don't have those profit centers in their restaurant. It's a ripple effect for a lot of things.
Well, plus there's just bad mojo with customers too, because they look at the pricing and go, "What's happening here?"
Yeah, I mean, how motivated are you to drink? I mean, I remember when I was in college, you could have dollar beer night, and there were $8 glasses of wine were common, and now you're starting to see more like 20 is the average at some new restaurants and bars.
Oh my God!
More
And
than
some
that.
of the new ones in Georgetown, for example.
So if you don't have a ton of funds and you're coming of drinking age, it's not really encouraging. Then this generates revenue and profit for bars and restaurants, tax dollars for governments. There's a lot at stake.
Right.
Well, can we talk about sort of that model a little bit for people who don't understand the restaurant model, like how those numbers come together?
Everywhere can kind of do their own, and it's kind of shifted from this, but I would say the old faithful model is typically if you were a bar or restaurant and you pay $20 for a bottle, you would charge $60 for it. If you pay, $10 for a bottle and you do it by the glass, you would charge $10, which is probably a blended mid to high 20s cost. I've seen groups try to recoup more because it's gotten harder, so they do percentages that are worse for the guest to try to get more profit opposed to volume, and it's that's kind of the old model that I've seen now. Instead of 3 times for bottles, it's more like 4 times. Glasses can be, instead of 4 times and change, more like 5 times.
We were somewhere recently where one glass of wine was $46. It must have been a good wine, but when I saw that, I was like, yeah.
Go ahead, Mike. You want to say something?
So I think there's nothing wrong with the $46 glass of wine. But at the same time, that same place should have a gateway drug of $9, $10.
They do not.
They do not.
I get it, and I think with what Brent is saying, and what I think we're all on the same page about is, I think a good example is Sancerre. Sancerre.
I like the Sancerre.
Everyone loves it. It's a comfortable, warm hug. Just the word Sancerre.
Yes.
But at the same time, Sancerre used to be $14 a glass. And it
Been
probably
a while.
It hasn't been that long. It really hasn't. And this is post tariffs the first time. Now everyone is comfortable with, if you're going to have a Sancerre by the glass, it's $20, $25.
Yeah, $22.
That's crazy, right?
Right.
This is Sauvignon Blanc. It's not a super expensive grape to produce.
But wait, we have to take a break.
All right, we're back on Foodie and the Beast and Industry Night dating for the first time. And Michael Scaffidi was just talking about, we were talking about the prices of a glass of wine. Here's what I want to say, because I'm the meatball on the show. I'm really here. I'm the consumer's voice. If tariffs raise prices, the problem is it eliminates the opportunity for a large share of the community to go to restaurants and enjoy wine, because you got a lot of government employees, less now, but you got a lot of government employees and a lot of people who, $27 for a glass of wine is really the cost of an entree too. I mean, at some point,
Not anymore.
you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying.
But $27 should be absolutely delicious. And now you're like, it might be. My wife and I recently went to a restaurant, and the wine list was so unapproachable that we said, let's leave, and we're going to go get margaritas across the street. Because there's nothing, everything started at $19 a glass.
Right.
And I just think you need to have an entryway that is accessible. One of the many reasons
And
why.
still tastes good.
It still tastes good.
Not Thunderbird.
And so that is, I think, more of the conversation is we want wine to be approachable for everyone.
Sure.
Yes.
And when that quality wine is now $20 a glass, it's not approachable for everyone.
Agreed. And we're not even talking tariff-priced wine yet. So let's go back a little bit. And Vanessa, I want to sort of direct this to you. Can we talk a little bit about how wine sales work? I mean, all of you can kind of talk about this in different capacities. Eric can jump in, Michael can jump in, and Brent, you're on the receiving end of it. But can we talk about, DC is a special model, but nationally we have a 3-tiered system. So can we discuss what that is and how it works?
So think of it that every time the wine changes hands, somebody has to get paid. So the winemaker has to get paid. The shipper from the winery to the port has to get paid. The shipper from the port to your final destination has to get paid. Then you have to pay customs, tariffs, which are, for lack of a very easy way to think about them is a tax.
Right.
An additional tax that's a line item. And then you have to pay to have that shipped again. Then you have to pay to send it to be stored in a warehouse. And then it has to be sold somewhere by someone. And then it has to be sold again somewhere to the consumer.
So there's so much
so
like
many layers.
dollars adding up before
Yes.
that bottle of wine either gets to your table, gets to the store, or gets in your glass, right?
Yes. So at each point, there's an additional cost to do business. So the 3-tier system, which was started, correct me if I'm wrong, I seem to remember like right after Prohibition, as a way to protect. It's state regulated, so every state has their own laws. But the entire country basically operates under a 3 to 4 tier to 5-tier system, depending on what state you're in.
Okay.
I came from Pennsylvania, which is a control state, just like Montgomery County,
Yes.
where the government is an additional layer. So the price of doing business in
Which is
Montgomery
why people
County,
always complain that there's not as good of wines that should be available because Montgomery, and I don't want to get Kathy
you can
Doom
get
upset.
You
but,
can get
you know,
almost anything in MoCo from anybody that's willing to distribute in MoCo. It's just not going to be cheap, and that is the price of doing business in Montgomery County, which is also one of the.
All right, so
wealthiest
let's-
Wait. Eric wants to say something. Go ahead, Eric.
No, just in thinking about the 3-tier system, Vanessa's correct, it was enacted with the 21st Amendment, the repeal of Prohibition, and it basically means that by law, we are precluded from direct purchase. It's the only product that precludes consumers from direct purchasing. So no other
Meaning
economic...
what? Can you explain that just a little? Let's just dig down and get to the nuances a little bit. Meaning a restaurant can't go like visit a winemaker. Like you all go on wine tours all the time. So let's say you're in Italy and you go have a fabulous wine. You can't just be like,
I'll take
ship me to my
40
restaurant,
cases,
right?
Correct. I
Okay.
can order a soup from Italy directly and have it shipped to my door, but I cannot do that with wine if I am a restaurant or a retailer. So the way the law works is any foreign wine needs to go through an importer. Then whether it's foreign or domestic, it needs to be sold through a distributor. So sold to and through a distributor.
Like me.
That's Vanessa, right? And then from distributor, it then gets sold to either a restaurant, on premise is what we call them, or retailer, off premise. And then from there, it can be sold to the end user.
Okay, so back in the 1930s, the whole system was gamed really by politicians who said this is how people in the middle are going to make money, and probably people in the middle we know are going to make money. So let's cut to today. Tariffs, there's that argument about tariffs. Who's paying the tariff? Okay, who's paying the tariff? Today, if you start layering...
Are you like me or I want to say
Well,
something?
layering tariffs on top of all that, what's the net effect?
Vanessa?
Tariffs increase prices for the end user additionally. So we actually had a conversation with a couple months ago with some French winemakers who were here for the champagne and sparkling tasting at Pop. And they
I
actually
don't think I was invited
I
to
don't think
that.
I was invited.
Vanessa was hosting. I was
Excuse
I was
me,
the sub-host.
Don't start throwing
Didn't you
shade.
say?
Actually,
Didn't you say don't invite them?
Nikki came home and said, "You know what's happening at Pop."
I believe you know my bosses as well. I will make sure to get Chris Schmidt on the horn.
Chris's fault.
The TLDR is they actually told all of us, they're like, we are inviting people from the Wine Trade Alliance and some local lobbyists and people that work in some of the senators' offices. And this was before, this was in the summer. The weather was nice. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
And
late summer.
it was a whole conversation where they had the winemakers directly tell people, we don't pay these tariffs. The importer has to pay them, or the distributor/importer. So you can be an importer and a distributor. It is separate licenses depending on the states. Not every state allows it. But think of it as usually there's less markup. It happens. It's there.
All right.
Okay,
so,
so wait.
We pay it, as
Right.
in we or the importer pay
Right.
that.
So, Mike, I want to get your opinion on this. So, the winemaker just charges more? Like, is it just starting at the winemaker charges more, and then the importer charges more, and then the distributor charges more? How does it work?
I think at the end of the day, to say quickly, the person who pays is you.
Right.
At
consumer.
the consumer, more than anything, yes, the consumer is the person who is paying more for their bottle of champagne, their
It's a
bottle of wine.
tax.
It's a tax.
We keep calling them tariffs, and I feel like it's a
It's a fancy word.
It's a fancy word, but it's no different than like the Boston Tea Party, right? Like the tea was taxed, people got mad, they dumped the tea. So I feel like...
And America started drinking coffee.
I think Thomas Jefferson said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but he said that a taxation on wine is a tax on the American people. So it's...
I was there when he said it. That was a direct quote.
Eric, go ahead. What do you want to say?
Well, no. So yes, we the end users and you the end users of the product are absolutely going to pay more. But the bigger issue about these tariffs is the way that the 21st Amendment is written. It is fundamentally illegal for a foreign entity to directly own an importer distributor, which means all of these tariffs that are targeting European wines are paid by American small businesses. The importers are American owned, the distributors are American owned, and the restaurants or retailers are American owned. So not only are these taxes not targeting the damage, the economic damage to the country that is causing the problem, it is actually doing direct economic damage to American small businesses. And let me explain what that means. Approximately 3,500 importers and distributors, all American-owned small businesses, about 48,000 independent retailers, and about 350,000 restaurants in this country, that they all bear the economic burden of these European tariffs on wine. And then not only does it cause them operational problems, that ultimately
Customers
gets borne over to the end consumer.
Right.
So you either have the consumers that are willing to pay that inflated price, or more likely you don't, and then these companies go out of business. And we saw with the first round, a lot of distributors, importers, restaurants, and retailers closed as a result.
All right, help us here, all of you, when those facts are presented to representatives of the administration who are all saying these tariffs are good and they got to pay their fair share and all that. What is the response?
So I spent about 2 weeks just before the congressional offices shut down for COVID. I spent 2 weeks as part of the United States Wine Trade Alliance meeting with Congress people and senators on both sides of the aisle.
Do they get it?
Some of them get it immediately. Some of them, once it's explained. I mean, it seems intuitive that like, oh, you're taxing us, we're going to tax you back, right? That seems intuitive. But once you actually explain why this is bad for American small business, let alone the loss of just domestic tax revenues, like every state has its own wine sales tax. Once you explain it to them, we found that almost unilaterally, Congress people on both sides of the aisle were in agreement that targeting wine, not against tariffs, but that targeting wine is ineffective and actually does the economic damage domestically in America with no impact overseas. French winemakers have no impact in French government and EU policy, nothing. No. And they're not paying the taxes. They just sit there and laugh at us.
Yeah.
Well, can we also zoom out a little bit on it? Because I'm sure there are people out there who are like, well, if you can't drink your fancy French wine, or you can't have your wine from Italy or Spain or wherever it's from in the EU, you should be drinking American anyway. You should be drinking American wine. So I do some work with Napa Valley Vintners. I certainly know where they stand on this. And they are not for tariffs for a lot of reasons, including what they export to, let's say, China and other countries, but also what the local winemakers use, domestic winemakers. And I think you can all talk about this because we weren't able to bring a winemaker on the show, but the products that they need to import to make their wines. So I'd love to hear, Brent, go ahead. I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, so I mean, like I just had a bottle with both of these with corks, one for better, one for worse, but around over 90% of corks, I think the current stat is from Alentejo in Portugal. That's an EU product that's brought over. So, I mean, that's something that a lot of wineries depend on. Even this champagne that I open right now, with tax and service, I just did the math. Post-tariff, it would be $200 for a special occasion. Right now, it would be like $150. So that's literally the jump once you not just include the tariff, but then the increased tax and tip from that too. So it's going to encourage people not to buy this, not give the government, a little more tax.
Sure, that makes sense. We're going to take the break now, and then when we come back, I kind of want to talk about the supplies of wine and how that adds up, especially if people are importing barrels or glass or etc. Yeah. This is David and Nycci Nellis. It is a Foodie and the Beast Industry Night collab. We're having an amazing panel discussion about tariffs or taxes and how it's going to affect the wine in your glass. We'll be back in just a second.
All right, we're back on Foodie and the Beast and Industry Night with David and Nycci Nellis. I'm counting my double salary. But we were talking about, Michael Scaffidi, join in here. We were talking about sort of the things that people wouldn't normally think about, like the corks and the barrels that the wines are,
What
go
makes
into.
wine? It's not just the
yeah.
grapes.
It's not just the juice.
Right.
And even now we have non-alcoholic wine, right, from all over and made. It could be the barrel. Brent mentioned that before off the air, that barrels come from everywhere. You don't always want American oak in a wine. French oak is beautiful. Slovenian oak is beautiful. Hungarian oak is beautiful. This comes from all over. The wine is a homogenous worldwide product.
Where do corks come from?
We already talked about that.
No, I mean,
Portugal.
Portugal. They're Polish corks too, aren't there?
I'm sure there are.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. But,
It's like the bark of a species of oak tree in Portugal for the most part, for almost the overwhelming majority.
Yeah, about Alentejano, is that right?
Alentejo.
Alentejo,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. And those are going to be
Portuguese.
I mean, we saw a complete breakdown. I think COVID showed us all how important the global economy is to everyday things. Our company ran out of cardboard. We could not get boxes to box product to send to people. One of our tequila suppliers was I think we were up to like 5 different kinds of bottles because it was whatever bottle he could buy. Sure. And when you break down and you create barriers to trade in any way, shape, or form and make it more difficult or more expensive, people have to make choices. Do we keep doing this? And American winemakers and American wineries. So our company distributes a very large portion of our products are European because they help pay for us to be able to also have really great domestic partners.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point because, and Eric, I'm going to go to you on this, but I think there is a real misconception out there that people understand how all these different businesses work, right? That everybody should understand how the wine industry works. Everybody should understand how the restaurant business works. Like that, I mean, do you know how the medical profession works? I mean, I don't, but...
No, I don't like needles. So.
Well, I like needles in my face, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, in order to be a doctor, you need a driver and a putter,
okay,
right?
But I'm sure my dad will love that comment. But honestly, people don't understand what it takes to do it all, and I think it's really important. Like I said, they'll think, well, now you have to drink American, but that does not. We can't have these little small American producers if we don't have the big European. Eric, can you talk more about that? Because I know you have a deeper understanding of that than I do.
Sure. Well, 2 thoughts. Number one, again, it seems intuitive to be like, oh, European wine's more expensive. Great, we'll just drink American. The thing is, they're non-fungible. I'll give you a perfect example. David is a self-identified meatball. Imagine if you needed to make...
Wait, I'm allowed to say that, Eric, not you.
You said it. You said self-identified, right?
I know, but...
Okay, so
nice.
let's roll with that. Let's roll with that. We're gonna have spaghetti and meatballs. But you can't use tomatoes for your sauce. You have to use strawberries. They're both fruits. It's the same thing, right? Shouldn't matter. Mm-hmm. That's the deal with, foreign wine and domestic wine. They are not equal. A Chablis drinker is not necessarily going to be as enthused about an oaky American Chardonnay. That's just the reality of it. So the idea that this will shift demand to American wine is essentially flawed. It seems intuitive, but it's absolutely not the case. It's a preferencing. If your favorite color is blue, it's not suddenly going to be green because it's hard to find blue. Mm-hmm. The bigger problem, though, is let's just assume, okay, I'm fine if I drink an American wine or an Italian wine. Remember, the 3-tier distribution system, by federal mandate, requires these American wineries to sell through a distributor. And if distributors are losing revenue and profitability to tariffs on their foreign entities, on their foreign wines, they can they can either no longer operate completely, or B, they don't have the money to buy American wines. And I have spoken to hundreds of winemakers who, during the first round of tariffs, found their domestic purchases through distribution drop by 70, 80% because there's no money for the distributors to buy these American wines to bring them to market. And so many small distributors closed during the first round of tariffs because they couldn't afford to do it. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of American wineries lost distribution in multiple states when these distributors closed. And the reason was tariffs on European wines. So there is a relationship there.
Let me ask this question to everybody, because if there's a lot of evidence that the tariffs end up bouncing back on and hurting really the American consumer, along with the businesses that are part of the food chain. And that must be known to the powers that be. So is it your sense that the threat of tariffs is more like gamesmanship? It's more like theater than it is the reality, because because these foreign nations that do have tariffs placed on them are responding in kind, and it's a lose-lose kind of situation.
Zero-sum game.
So when you met with on the Hill, you don't have to name names. Was there a recognition
I want
that?
names.
Yeah, we want names now.
We want names. Put them
But
down
I
on
mean,
the list.
a recognition that we want to please the powers that be, but our constituents are going to eat us alive.
Yes and no. I think, again, on the surface, it sounds sensible. And I just want to reiterate, like, the EU has predatory and discriminatory trading practices with the United States, and we should be instituting retaliatory tariffs. But, like, let's look at the DST, the Digital Services Tax, which is why the tariffs are on the table again now. That is a tax on a service, not a product. And if you want to hit the EU where it
can
hurts.
I just say for the record, and it's also a tax on a service that makes gobs and gobs and gobs.
You can say trillions.
Of money.
You can say trillions.
I mean, we're talking about. They can
afford
afford it. We're
It's
talking
not.
about Amazon. We're talking about Google. I mean, we're talking about these people who provide an amazing service. We all
But
use it.
they don't want to pay it, and it's just like super
I
uber
get
billionaires
it.
who don't want to
Point-
pay
point-
They pass it on to us
another
anyway.
dollar in taxes.
0.01% is they're like, we're mad about this, so let's punish the other
Right.
people.
Right.
And it's not nice.
Well, can we talk
you know?
about the tariffs? Yeah, go ahead, Brent.
The last time that the tariffs were instituted was a dispute with Airbus. So who's to say it won't be collateral damage with something else in the future?
Well,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, so that was my question. So the last time they did tariffs, which was 2020 before the pandemic, what was the overall effect? Did it do anything? Did change happen?
Yeah, there were losses.
Yeah,
No. But did the EU be like, okay, we'll capitulate? Was there capitulation?
Not at all. And not only that, the effect that it had was $250 million of economic damage domestically and zero economic damage to the EU. If you have a dispute with unfair subsidies with Airbus, tariff Airbus planes at 100%.
Right.
I promise that will last 8 minutes and it will be over. Right. So if the goal is to solve an underlying trade dispute, there are much better options. Target companies that generate high revenue, and most importantly, high revenue that they bring back to the EU. French or Italian or German wineries, when they sell to the US, for every dollar they make, $4 to $5 is generated in the American economy that stays in the American economy. But let's look at like luxury fashion, for instance. There is nothing preventing a luxury French fashion or a luxury Italian fashion brand.
Hey.
Hang on.
We're not going after the luxury fashion people either. They already charge enough money, okay?
Yes.
Sorry, Nikki, that Birkin's going to get more expensive.
My underwear just twitched.
Seriously.
But just as an example, if you want to really effectively do reciprocal economic harm, right? A luxury fashion brand can own and import their own products into this country, build a store that they own in this country, sell it for whatever markup they want, and bring 100% of the revenue back to France. That is not what happens with wine. If you want to go after a country or a block of countries to equalize trading practices, you actually need to attack them where it hurts.
Well,
wine doesn't hurt them because we bear the economic cost of taxing wine.
You're talking about a tariff that's a Tomahawk missile that's effective versus a tariff that's a blunderbuss that hits everybody.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You'd rather hurt Eric's Tom Ford glasses than hurt in a $7 glass of wine.
Okay.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Glasses, not glasses.
Glasses, not glasses. Yeah,
Right.
I think that's a great way to put it. You'd rather harm. You don't want to harm anyone at the end of the day.
So I guess the question really is for people who don't understand it, why is wine at risk now?
Why is
Because-
wine on the table? Yeah.
Why is wine on the table? What are your thoughts about that? Vanessa?
My assumption is that they look at the numbers of the amount of product that's imported and they say this is a really big number and we should be making money on that. And that's just simple economics.
Right?
I don't pretend to know the actual reasons.
Mike?
I'm with Vanessa. I don't know. I just think I think Eric is 100% correct when talking about retaliatory tariffs, but I'm speculating here. I just don't like it, and I'd rather not
nobody
happen.
does. Brent?
But I can't believe Brent's raising his
I know,
hand.
I
I
love
think
that you
a
are.
giant misconception that's been explained in different ways throughout this is that if you mess with wine, it only gets elitist, and it has nothing to do with like the wealth of the country or the working class or middle class. So I think that.
Oh, so wait. Let's just dig down on a moment, because I think this is a very interesting point. There is that very big misconception that wine is elitist.
Yes.
And so they feel that they can attack wine because only the rich drink it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times if you're someone and you're not a big wine drinker, or if you think it's for elitists, you're just like, well, what do I care? What do I have to be concerned about? But it generates so much money for the country and for bars and restaurants that pay tax revenue. Those extra layers to it are important, not just thinking it's some elitist thing that who gives a crap about it.
Well, and honestly, to your point just a little bit, if you think about the fact that every state in this country, I think except Alaska, but maybe Alaska does too, makes wine. There are wineries all across the states, and they are huge business additions. Like if you think about what's going on in Virginia, you think about just locally, what the wine and the wineries and people going out and doing tastings and being club members and et cetera, like what wine money brings to the regions where there are wineries, like that is a huge perk.
Not just that, but there's also, Nycci, apart from the domestic wine consumption, there's sales tax revenues, there's retail tax revenues from these wineries selling cheese or whatever in their shop. But also, let's just assume that wine is an elitist thing, which we all know it's not. If that's the case, there are still hundreds of thousands of people employed in that industry: warehouse workers, dock workers, truck drivers, forklift
we haven't
drivers.
Even gone into
that also benefit economically
food chain
from
of
wine.
Right.
So it's an industry, and when an industry is healthy, everyone is healthy. When an industry is unhealthy, like with predatory tariffs, everyone is unhealthy.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're really going to talk about what can we do? What can you, the layperson, do? What can the restaurateur do? What can the distributor? What can the importer? What can everybody do to sort of make sure that what comes in your glass comes as clean as possible and not upcharged because of taxes? This is David and Nycci Nellis. It is an industry night and Foodie and the Beast collab. We'll be back in just a sec.
All right, we're back on Foodie and the Beast and Industry Night dating for the first time. And we're really coming down to kind of the end of the conversation. And the end of the conversation is really, what can people do? Yes, you can write your congressman. Yes, you can make phone calls. Yes, you can give money to groups that are trying to promote awareness of the downside. But what do you folks think?
Brent, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think to bring awareness, I would try to get restaurants and bars first in D.C. and then nationally to band together, show a 25% increase to their wine prices in a column and say, this is what it would be, just to bring awareness to it.
Right,
and then
publish it to menus.
Then all these people that go out to eat and drink that they like, ordering these wines and stuff like that, it brings awareness to them. That's just in like a bar or restaurant setting. There's numerous other ways that I'm sure my peers can explain, but I would want to start a campaign for that. Just to get it on people's radar.
I'm fully supportive of that campaign. Yeah. But can you tell me like how you envision that being enacted? Because to me, it could be so dramatic. Is it just as simple? Will the tax be 25%? I mean, is that what we're assuming?
Hypothetically, nothing's in legislation for that yet. That's just kind of assumed where it would roughly be. I think we can also put a link at the bottom of the menu, just like how we inform people if there's a service charge, saying for more information, go here.
Right.
So we need to kind of give
a QR code.
Because I think what's most important is, for me, while this is political, that it's not politicized, right? So that when people come, you're not lecturing them, you're not being like, you should be this or you should be that. It's just simply, if this tax goes through,
these are the facts.
These are the facts. It's the math.
It's a bipartisan effort to not do something foolish for everyone.
Actually, that's really the tactic. Math doesn't lie.
Right.
Math is math.
Math is math.
Yeah.
Right? Sure. Okay. Go ahead, Vanessa.
I think understanding the 3-tier system is really just step one. So I'm also president and CEO of a nonprofit for women in the wine industry in DC, and we have.
Do you not want to name it?
It's called Retaliatory.
Okay, I know.
Sorry, I forget. I get excited. We've been talking about doing a panel of women in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, where we kind of have the most reach, talking about the impact and what things that we can do in brainstorming, because things like what Brent is suggesting are very great actionable items. Really just having all this information out here, sharing that with the consumer. Until I worked in this industry, my parents had no idea what, they were just like, wine costs this many dollars. And then my dad, I'll never forget that conversation with my dad about Pinot Noir. Like, the difference between French Pinot Noir and American Pinot Noir and why it's this price and why it's that price and Burgundy and all of these things, and him being like, I understand why it costs more. I also understand why there's $5 wine on the shelf from all over Europe. There's not a lot of $5 wine on the shelf from the U.S. Why is that? Tons of reasons. But really just understanding that global economy makes us all stronger, and we've literally seen that over the last couple hundred years, that having access to more goods that at the beginning are luxury, but now are an everyday thing.
No, listen, I feel like the global economy, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We've been a global economy. We are used to a very certain access to things now. You know, there was a time where sun-dried tomatoes were strictly from Italy, and now they're in my refrigerator. Like, you know what I mean? Or
nobody likes to have something that they have access to. No one likes for that to be taken away,
Of course not.
or for it to cost more money, and that's the end
For
of it.
prohibition
Mike
stocks.
wants to say what?
Yeah.
It's gross.
I think the most actionable thing anyone can do right now is to drink more wine.
Okay,
Go-
pour
go-
some
go-
more, Brent.
go-
Let's do it.
Go
volunteer's
into,
tribute.
go into your favorite restaurant, bar, retail shop, buy the bottle you love, drink it, fall in love with it. And just like Brent said, you're going to see those prices change. And so fall in love with, continue to drink what you drink. And I think this is a very actionable item that you could see by putting this wine down your gullet.
I'm going to disagree with you only because that's great, but that doesn't affect decision making.
Well, it does. If you drink more, you can make better
Brent's, I mean,
decisions.
going along with what
Yeah,
Brent
because once
said,
you drink more, you drink more.
and then
No,
now
but
you
if
need,
the-
if you are going to raise a uniform voice that says, this is how it is now, this is how it's going to be, there has to be an organization that takes the lead, and there has to be money.
But it's not just the money; it's the affects.
You wait a minute. let me
There's
finish.
also
Let
romance
me
of it,
finish.
though, too.
It
right?
takes
I
money
appreciate where you're coming
to
from.
inform. It's no different than in the past election. One party had a pretty unified message. Not saying it was so great, but whatever. The other party was all over the place, and it showed. So in order for this to be more than visiting on
Okay, Brent
Capitol
has
Hill,
something to say. He's raising
how do you
his
do
hand.
it? Where does
Go
the
ahead,
money
Brent.
come from?
But my point doesn't solve the issue that I raised, where people don't think wine is some elitist thing that only benefits nice restaurants for the most part. That still has to be solved. This is just kind of like getting it on there, getting kind of a seat at the table for future conversations.
Agreed.
So I think that even though there's so many things where you have to make, I feel like, people as a whole feel like how it's a negative for everyone. And that's,
Right.
Well, and
but
if I can
again,
add to
that's
that,
messaging.
I think really what's important is when people think of it as elitist, because I love that we sort of hit on that, they don't think about the farmer who grows the wine. They don't think about how small it is. It's no different than when we talk about federal government workers. They're not just some fat cat sitting on the hill. There's somebody at Yellowstone who helps make sure that the tourists who come don't ruin that gorgeous place, right? So,
Or you don't go pet the grizzly.
right, or the buffalo or whatever.
Their
So,
social media works so hard.
but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
it's changing the perception of who it really affects. So we're gonna have to wrap it up, Eric. I'd love for you to just sort of give people some of those data points again, so that they're really clear on, how this really affects what comes into your glass.
Sure, absolutely. And the biggest thing that if those of you listening could have one takeaway from this, it's that
Or watching, you could be
or watching, please
YouTube.
please understand that by federal mandate and law through the 21st Amendment, all of the economic harm from wine tariffs is kept domestically. It does no damage to the overseas market. It only damages American, largely, for the most part, small businesses, right? So that's number one. And we're talking about more than 500,000 small business, or about 500,000 small businesses between restaurants, retailers, importers, distributors. That's number one. Then there is a multiplier effect of that economic damage to the workers of those businesses, not just the businesses themselves, but then the people employed by them, and then their economic security. That's number one. Number two, there is an effective way to win at a trade dispute. But this would be like, you swore at me, so I punched my sister. Well, how does that?
By the way, Eric, your sister called.
Yeah, right. But how does that? Like, maybe you feel like, oh, that he shouldn't have punched his sister. But like, how does that make? It doesn't, right?
It doesn't resolve the issues.
So the these are retaliatory tariffs, and the way that the law is written right now, if they're back on the table, the USTR has to have them open for a comment period. So even though, like, I know it's a pain in the behind to like log in and submit your comments, if you submit your comments to the United States Trade Organization and say, hey, don't go after wine, go after something else, that actually has a tremendous amount of effect. So let's reverse these predatory and discriminatory trade practices, but leave wine off the table.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Believe it or not, the show is over, and we had a really good conversation today, and I want to thank you all for being here. If I could just hit each of you, if you could please say where you are and where people can find you, either on Instagram or your website. We don't need the www. That would be great. Brent, let's start with you.
You can find me at Maxwell Park or Pop Fizz, typically bartending or making recommendations.
And Mike?
You could find me often. I will go to Maxwell quite often.
Okay, great. We'll see you at the bar.
But you'll see me throughout Washington, D.C.
And is there a way to people to find you on Insta?
You can see Scaffsom.
Okay.
Some of my friends just call me Scaffsom randomly too.
All right, then that's what we'll do going forward. Ms. Cominsky.
You can find me on Instagram at vminsky. And if you want to follow our Women in Wine organization, it's Women of Wine DC. On Instagram as well.
Excellent, thank you. And Eric?
You'll find me mostly at 40,000 feet on a plane, but on Instagram, I'm at Eric4Wine, ERIK, the number 4. If you can't spell wine, we're not friends. I also have a wine club called Good Somm at Good Somm. Yeah, thank you for having us. This has been great.
Okay, so I want to thank everybody for coming in today. I'm going to give you your time. Just relax.
Give me that mic.
My God, did you see him grab it? Okay, so David is going to say a couple things, and then it'll come back to me.
I just want people to know where you can find me is doing whatever my wife tells me to do.
Smart.
I want to remind everybody that there is ongoing misery in the world, in Ukraine, in the Middle East, people who suffer from the fires in California. There's a lot of misery in the world. Take 5 seconds out and $5 out or $1 out of your pocket and give it to the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, Jose, World Central Kitchen. Help everybody who needs help, because we're all in this together. And it's easy to be kind of self-satisfied and sit back and say, well, I've got mine. But there are a lot of people that need your help, so help them.
And with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us on this show today. This was such an amazing conversation. There is so much you can do to be involved with what's happening in our country right now, and making sure what's poured in your glass is not 25% more. So educate yourself, take the time, learn what's happening, and be smart about what you're doing. And don't forget, you can call your congressperson, you can make noise as a way of helping those, because our small businesses, our restaurants, our importers, our producers, everybody, there are all people behind it. It's not some veiled face. It's not some conglomerate. We all are looking just to live our lives as best we can, and we should all help each other. To that point, I want to thank everybody again for joining me today. I want to thank the guys in today to help us making Industry Night. It's so exciting. And of course, Andy, thank you. So you'll hear this show on Foodie and the Beast, and then you'll see it on Industry Night. Don't forget to follow me at NYCCINELLIS on all the platforms, including YouTube, where you'll see this show. Be safe out there and have a delicious week.
Produced by Heartcast Media.